So the next series of International Cafe presentations will be delivered by Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada. Starting off this afternoon is Emmanuel Kamarianakis, Minister, Counselor at the Canadian Embassy in Rome. Emmanuel will speak to the Canada-Italy Science and Technology Relationship, Opportunities for Collaboration. I know there will be opportunity to ask some questions at the end of the presentation, so welcome, Emmanuel.
Thanks very much. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'll just plan my presentation, maybe start off with a little bit of an overview about Italy and the relationship with Canada, and then get into a little bit more detail and analysis of the S&T relationship and opportunities for collaboration. So just to note in general that even though this is a tough year, of course, in the European economy and Italy's economy, both our imports and exports are increasing into Italy in particular. And our two-way trade is now about $7 billion bilaterally. Although we haven't seen a huge amount of growth on the export side, we are seeing a lot of growth on investment and in S&T collaboration. And these are two areas where our trade program at the Embassy is really focusing on. The investment program as well is doing quite well, as I mentioned, and on this we're seeing relatively significant results. I highlight investment because it's also an area that leads naturally into S&T collaboration, in particular by these, I wouldn't say small, but medium-sized Italian enterprises that are world-class, that have a relatively ambitious international agenda and are looking to enter the North American market. And they're looking at, of course, making investments in Canada. And we're promoting an active outcall program and did over 200 outcalls to potential investors last year, focusing on some key sectors, among them agri-food, automotive, advanced manufacturing, and I think we've had some pretty decent success. In particular, Ferrero Rocher, you may or may not know this, but they manufacture all of their chocolates for the North American market out of Brampton and are actually expanding their presence and increasing production out of that plant. And we're also seeing a lot of investment in the oil and gas sector, primarily in Alberta, but part of that is linked into the manufacturing sector in Ontario because some of these companies are coming into this destination to manufacture, to access clients out west. I would just add as a small aside that we also are seeing some increase in investment from Canada into Italy. One in particular has caught our attention because it has an S&T element to it. A company called Westport recently bought a company called Emer, A-M-E-R, which is a leader in alternative fuel systems. And the reason they effectively purchased this company was to gain access to the technology that they have, but also to seek their markets and their clients and such as well. My next quick point is on global value chains as another aside, and this is an area of focus for us as well. The most obvious example that we have is in the automotive sector, and it's the merger of the supply chains, of the value chains of Fiat and Chrysler. With the merger of the companies, what happened is that the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers in their respective supply chains are beginning to enter each respective market and to seek opportunities for growth. The reality is that Europe's automotive market is probably oversupplied. There's excess capacity. There isn't a huge amount of growth in auto production in Europe, whereas in North America there is. And we're seeing more interest on the part of Italians wanting to come here and invest than we see on the other side of the equation. Nevertheless, that's one example of the global value chain integration that we're seeing between, well, in general between Europe and North America, and more specifically in my case between Italy and in Canada. Now, why Italy is a partner for S&T? We're natural partners. We both have excellence in key areas, and one of the key areas is quality of life, health, environment, energy, and new materials. We both have similar sized economies with a lot of SMEs. In Italy's case, a lot of these companies are privately owned, family-owned companies between, let's say, 50 to 250 million euros in revenues. And so there's a lot of interest on their part to expand markets and to look at North America as the destination. As well, another advantage that we have in the relationship is the strong people-to-people connections with over 1.5 million Canadians of Italian origin. 2,000 plus researchers from Italy in Canada, and 160 university linkages. So there's a lot of stuff going on from an academic perspective, from a people-to-people perspective, and as well from a business-to-business perspective with over $7 billion of bilateral trade. Quickly, I'll just mention quickly that Italy now has a technocratic government. What does that mean? It means that the previous government of Prime Minister Berlusconi resigned. A government was appointed by the President of Italy, and Italy now has a technocratic government that is going to be managing the country until they go to elections in 2013. The reason I flag this is because the new Minister of S&T in Italy is the former rector of the Politecnico di Torino and is a huge friend of Canada, has been involved in several projects with Canadian universities, and is a big champion of the integration between Fiat and Chrysler that I mentioned earlier. Another key ally that we have in the Italian system is the head of the CNR, or the National Research Council equivalent in Italy. This is a professor named Luigi Nicolais, who is another big fan of Canada, an ally of Canada, and has been working extensively with Canadian companies primarily in aerospace composites. And he's now the president of this institute, and we're looking at building even further the bilateral collaboration institute to institute between Canada and Italy. Now getting into a bit more granularity and more detail, one of the initiatives that we launched a few years ago as an embassy in Rome is something called Tavolo Canada. This is a bilateral framework, let's say, that identifies certain areas of priority and tries to build relationships and linkages and cooperation. We try to link it to our trade agenda and our investment agenda. And we've identified certain key areas of focus or priorities. There's 6 of them. Agri-food is an obvious one, both for Canada and Italy. Transportation is another strong one, and this links into the issue of Fiat Chrysler, as I mentioned, but also what Bombardier is doing, Bombardier Transport is doing in Italy. Another strong one is health and life sciences, new materials and nanotechnology, and the latest one that we've added is ocean technologies. So these are areas that Italy has strengths in and that Canada has strengths in, and we're trying to drive that collaboration using various mechanisms, from adding S&T elements to existing trade events, from adding S&T elements to our investment agenda, and from just bringing together academics and researchers and institutes together. Another element of our bilateral program in Italy is the talent strategy, as we term it. And this is a program to bring together leading Canadian and Italian research universities in our priority sectors. There's a whole list, and if anybody's interested, I can give you a presentation with exactly what the cooperation is. But there's numerous examples of this talent strategy that we brought forward over the last few years that I think is paying some real dividends. And I think one example that comes to mind is a recent joint degree program that was launched between the Politecnico di Torino in Turin, where Italy's automotive center, and the University of Windsor, where there's a joint degree program for a master's in automotive engineering. And there's 5 students from Italy currently in Windsor completing their master's. It's an 18-month program, and there's 5 Canadian students from Windsor in Torino finishing their master's as well. And the expectation is that once these students graduate, they will then work, in the case of the Italians, they'll be working somewhere in Fiat supply chain, and in the case of the Canadians, they'll go back and work in Chrysler supply chain. And because they'll have those connections and knowledge of the respective sectors, it'll just lead to spin-off benefits years and years down the road. So as I mentioned, it's 5 students now, but it's expected to grow further. And we're always trying to advance these types of collaboration and drive even more academic to academic and institute to institute collaboration. Now, I'll quickly get into some specific opportunities for increased cooperation, and this is linked to our business plan for 2012-13. We kind of use a fiscal year basis in the government, so we go over a 2-year period. But I'll focus on health and life sciences. Here we've identified biotech, genomics, neurosciences, degenerative diseases, imaging, and pharma as the key areas. And our key initiative for this year is going to be Biopartnering North America in Vancouver. And we'll bring a delegation of Italian companies and Italian researchers to biopartnering and establish meetings, do B2Bs, business-to-business meetings, and try to get collaboration. Another key area for us is new materials for transportation, and these are primarily advanced composites and biomaterials. And here we're going to have a mission likely led by the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Gino Nicolais, who's head of the CNR, the National Research Council in Italy. And this is intended to be a mission to look at collaboration, primarily in the auto sector, for new materials, for composites. And I would just add as a parenthesis, I've got a few minutes left here, that the new Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a significant portion of the fuselage is being manufactured in Puglia. This is by a company called Finmeccanica and one of their subsidiaries called Alenia. And why I'm explaining this is because this whole region in southern Italy is a true aerospace cluster with significant technological capacity. And we've been trying to bring this kind of delegation to Canada. We're going to be doing it in the fall, and it just will help, I expect, and we hope, further collaboration between what's already relatively significant Italian investment in the aerospace sector in Canada. Another key area is clean tech, and here we have several initiatives for this year, this fiscal year for us. We're going to have a delegation at the ICOE, the International Conference on Ocean Energy, which will be taking place in Ireland. We're going to be launching a Trento Green Building Innovation Partnership with the region of Trento, where there's a certain expertise in green building technology. We're going to be putting together a smart grid R&D mission to Europe. It'll be coming to Italy. We're going to be doing it likely in Germany and I think a couple of other European destinations. And we're looking to recruit companies, researchers, institutes in smart grid technology to come to Europe and basically undertake about a week roadshow to meet with potential partners and clients, et cetera. And then finally, we have another mission on composites, this time in the aerospace sector, again in the fall. And then quickly, I'll just mention two last ones. Agri-food, we are going to be doing events in the agri-food sector. We did an event at the World Dairy Conference in Parma, which took place a few months ago. And the Italians recently put about €1 million on the table unilaterally in funding to fund joint agri-food R&D projects with Canada. And then the last one I'd mention is Ocean Technologies. And this one is going to be a mission to Italy by the St. John's Oceans Advanced Cluster. And again, this is just following up to our Tavolo Canada initiatives, our priority sectors. And these are just some examples of the initiatives that we're doing specific to S&T with, of course, commercialization, trade, and investment links to them. I'm at my time, so I think I'll end it there and ask if there's any questions. Good. No questions? Maybe I'll add one point then. There's another initiative that we've been doing called Starbook. It's just a working title for us. Start me up, right? But this is an initiative where we're going out. Normally, trade sections and embassies will go out and do outcalls, corporate outcalls, investment outcalls. What we're doing is we're beginning a program of S&T outcalls, innovation outcalls, where we target innovative, world-class, world-leading Italian companies, and we're going to go in, and we are going in, and not visiting the business development people or the corporate people. We're going to go in and we are seeing the R&D directors, the ones that normally don't deal a lot with embassies or on trade issues, and trying to get them to collaborate with potential Canadian partners. And we had an example of that linked to a recent mission that we had in February in Piemonte, where we went to visit a company called Lando Renzi, which has alternative fuel technology, and we wanted to go in and meet with their R&D people and R&D crowd and try to get some of that collaboration going between subject matter experts, not just purely trade or investment. So we're launching this out across the country and primarily focusing on Northern Italy. And so far, it's been a mixed bag. I mean, some companies don't want to deal with you. It's proprietary technology. They'd rather not talk about it. Or if they do want to talk about it, they don't want to necessarily talk to us about it. But others are very willing and very open to discuss ways to collaborate. And we're using this project to help, of course, at the same time, also advance our other objectives. If they want to talk about trade or talk about investment, we also do the follow-up with them there. So there's several little pieces in the puzzle, and I just give you a quick overview. But if you have any questions, either now or later, I'll be around. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you. Kevin, you got a question? The best way is frankly to contact us directly, so I can give my business card or details, or additionally through our regional office here in Toronto, which can put you in contact with our offices abroad, any offices abroad for that matter. But I'd say that the best way is to contact us directly with specific questions, and you can find us, of course, either just by looking for us on the internet, of course, through Google, or just contacting me directly or my team, and we'd be more than happy to give you more details as to what our initiatives are. Good. That's good. Thanks.
Thank you, Emmanuel. That was very informative. It's great to learn about the opportunities for collaboration between Italy and Canada. For you, those of you just joining us this afternoon, my name is Sharon Jobity, and I'm the Director of Human Resources with the Ontario Centres of Excellence. And it's a pleasure to be your host here this afternoon. So moving right along, our next presentation from Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada is entitled, "The Netherlands, Bigger Than You Thought." Here to present is Bill Pound, Counselor at the Canadian Embassy in The Hague. Welcome. I think there'll be some time for questions as well after the presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Italy's always a tough act to follow, but I'll try. I think the message I kind of want to leave you with, and why the Netherlands may be bigger than you thought, is that it probably is bigger than you thought, and more important than you thought. And so my mission here is really a BizDev mission. I'm not trying to tell you that everything we have is the latest and greatest in S&T collaboration or in innovation. However, I am going to demonstrate to you that the Netherlands is probably one of the ideal entry points into a much larger European continent. So this is the test part of my presentation. I've just thrown up a few factoids about the Netherlands, which are depicted here. And I think that all of them sort of will drill into an indication of why the Netherlands is such an innovative economy. And so start with highest, and the country certainly doesn't have many mountains, but it is the highest spending government per capita in Europe. It invests heavily in infrastructure and social infrastructure, invests heavily in R&D and industrial development. In fact, it's just announced a new plan where it has focused on 9 top sectors, which are the focus of its economic development model for the next 2 decades. First is up there because it is the largest agricultural exporter in Europe per capita, and it ranks first in terms of European investment into Canada. We have some $55 billion of Dutch investment and an active investment program, very much like Emmanuel. The Dutch are outward looking, and we tend to look at the investment program as really one of the best ways of uncovering the opportunities for investment in innovation and new technologies. The second number in this picture, if you can find it, is really aimed at the overall relationship between Canada and Europe, and it's the second largest export destination in Europe for Canadian products. And a lot of that deals with the so-called Rotterdam effect, but around that has built up a huge transport and logistics industry, which is quite remarkable, and certainly serves as the gateway into Europe. I'm going to go through this very quickly, but it has the longest canal or dike system in the world, and certainly a lot of cities with canals, but there again is a need for innovation. So if you look at a country that 40 to 45% of is underwater or under sea level, you can realize how they quickly become experts in water management and in actually soil management, because a lot of that land has been reclaimed or actually built as a result of dredging. And it would be no secret that several Dutch companies are active in Canada, here in Toronto, doing the harbour front project, the soil cleanup. They also are extremely active in the oil sands and the tailings ponds, doing R&D to try and determine how best to ameliorate the tailings ponds out there. The other one I think is very, very interesting is the 0.008 number, and that is the representation of the world's land mass and what the Netherlands plays into it. So it's one of the smallest countries in the world. In fact, it ranks 134th in terms of land area, but it's the highest density population country in the world, and certainly in Europe, with a population, and I think the number's on there somewhere, but I can't find it. It's not the 304, and it's not the 2,556, but it does show you how such a small country can become such an economic powerhouse by investing in its people and in its future. I'll skip to the 2,556. That is the number of patents that were issued by Philips, the largest patent holder in the Netherlands, in 1 year in 2010. It gives you an idea of the size of investment that they make in R&D and in new technologies, centered around Eindhoven in southern Netherlands, which is really the hotbed of innovation. And I think the last number that I will go for on this is 304, and that is the number of Akzo Nobel offices in Canada. It shows you the level to which the Dutch have integrated into our economy almost seamlessly. And there's the message there, I think, is that we do make very, very good partners when we get together, and certainly the Dutch need space with where to grow. And yesterday we heard an interesting term that I hadn't heard before, but I think it's a very appropriate one in the Netherlands, which is the Born Global concept for startups, which is happening more and more in Canada. Well, for the Netherlands, it's an absolute necessity. They don't have the land, the space, the markets to service their own domestic market. They have to, by the very nature of the country, expand beyond their borders quickly. And so virtually any company that you see in the Netherlands is a global concern from the very start. So, what is next? And I know that this is the theme of this event here, and so I tried to capture in that what next looked like for the Dutch, and so what they're kind of looking for in terms of collaboration and technology acquisition, or in fact marketing. And so what they're looking for obviously are ideas, and everybody's looking for ideas, but the Dutch are really aggressive buyers of ideas. I use the term tulip investors. They buy the bulb and they make it better. And they've done a lot of that here in Canada. They've bought some very early growth companies in Canada and really worked to expand them. And a lot of their multinationals do this. So Philips is a big investor in early technologies. So is Shell. So are many of the others. They want better. They are constantly looking for better processes and better ways of doing things. So just like ourselves, but it's almost endemic in society that they're always looking for something better. It's not an economy that's steeped in history and is stuck in history. It really is a forward-looking economy. Product and concept, I put those two together simply because it's not to them necessary to actually be at the product stage. That you can be at the concept stage with the Dutch and have a very meaningful discussion about collaboration or some kind of a joint partnership to go together. Skills, they're always looking for skills, and again, maybe overshadowed by some of the developments more to the south of Europe, where you see very high unemployment and very dramatic budget cuts from governments there. The Dutch are, like the Germans in many ways, used to being in a very high employment economy. So the unemployment rate in the Netherlands runs at about 3% on an annual basis. And if you take that as that 3%, you realize that they actually don't have enough people to fill all the positions that they have available. And so they have to be innovative to make things happen. And so they are always looking for new skills to bring into that mix. Financing, I guess they're no different than than Canada here. But I think that there's a nice mixture in that the Dutch kind of understand the budgetary processes that we would go through to fund research and development, very similar to the Canadian reality. Both sides are always looking for financing. Fortunately, the pension funds in the Netherlands are all private, and therefore they invest heavily in some of the higher risk, earlier stage type of ventures. They also have, and why I think this is good for Canada, they look a great deal to the European Union for funding of their projects. And the European Union is a massive spender on S&T, R&D, and innovation, and becoming larger. And I think that the ability to collaborate with any company in any country of Europe gives you access to that type of funding. The important element from the Dutch perspective is that Brussels is really right next door, and they seem to have a very good pipeline into the funding mechanisms that exist in Europe. And I think it's really, really important, especially when you're at sort of proof of concept idea or very early stage development, to have access to those kinds of funds. Partners I put here because I think that naturally the Dutch are great partners for Canada. I could go back to the previous slide and say that second also stands for the second largest English-speaking country in Europe. The Dutch are polyglots, but really 90% of the population of 18 million people speaks English. And as a result, there are fewer barriers to communication and greater transparency in the discussion that you can have in the Netherlands versus many of the other European countries. Markets, and I think this goes to the global nature of the Dutch. They do have a long and storied history of global activity. The oldest shareholding company in the world was founded in the Netherlands in the 1600s. The oldest stock market in the world was founded in the Netherlands about 2 days before the company was founded, because they were both owned by the same family. And then they've necessarily grown a great deal of trade and mercantile activities around the world. So if you're looking for market access and you're looking for a partner that can take you global and thinks globally naturally, the Dutch are ideal partners in that way. So then you get to, obviously, the customers. They have existing routes to customers, channels to customers throughout Europe and throughout the world. And again, one of the reasons why the Netherlands is the second largest goods export destination for Canada is that they do tend to be mercantilists. They buy and sell things with great frequency. So they make great partners for Canada. Just to kind of finish off here, I thought I'd give you an idea of some of the names that are active, and these are some of the largest R&D spenders, not only in the Netherlands but in Europe. Some of them, in fact, are transnational corporations in and of themselves. Both Shell and Unilever have headquarters in both London and, in the case of Shell, in The Hague, where I am, and in the case of Unilever in Rotterdam, but also a large number of other companies. And the other part of this is that all of these companies have invested in Canada as well and have bought technology here. For example, TomTom is working on M2M with both DAF trucks and with Sierra Wireless in Vancouver. Royal Boskalis has invested in a large soil remediation company in Western Canada, is undertaking a significant amount of research there. Imtech has bought a company in Quebec, and this, again, it follows the model of the Dutch buying and partnering with companies and trying to grow from there. So with my last slide, I'll give you the kind of the focus point of the Netherlands embodied in this logo. This is probably one of the largest R&D spenders in the Netherlands, DSM, which is an amorphous company that's transitioned itself through various industries, an extremely innovative company that has gone from a mining company to a chemicals company, now to a life sciences company and a nutritional company. And their logo says it all to me about the Netherlands, which is bright science and brighter living. And I think that's what the Dutch invest heavily in. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, please take them. Okay. No questions?
Bill, thank you. You presented a lot of very interesting facts about the Netherlands that I certainly wasn't aware of. I'm sure many others may feel the same way, but thanks for enlightening us. Very interesting information. Our next Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada presentation this afternoon will be offered by Terry Weissenberger. Terry is the Counsel and Senior Trade Commissioner with the Consulate General of Canada in San Francisco, and Terry will speak to Canadian Technology Accelerator and related services in San Francisco. Again, Terry, I'm sure you'll have some, if there's any questions, Terry will be able to answer them at the end of the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring a little bit of context first for my talk. We all know that startup, innovation, entrepreneurs are the root of our wealth, but not all entrepreneurs and not all companies are born equal. There is the vast majority who are a destiny of modest growth, the coffee shops and so on. And there is a very, very small fraction, but very well represented here, who are on a path for very fast growth and a global ambition. There is a little bit of statistic I'd like to share with you right now to illustrate my point. The National Venture Capital Association of the US just released a study a couple of weeks ago pointing to the fact that venture-backed companies in the US represent less than 0.2% of the number of companies, but they also represent 21% of the GDP and 11% of the jobs. So I think that stats explain you why to a large extent, what I'm going to present right now is to focus on that 0.2% and less because of the potential for high growth. If I can make that work. Yes. So beyond that point, I'm situated in Silicon Valley, San Francisco. So first of all, the Silicon Valley is not a valley, but it's a strip of maybe 30 miles from San Francisco to San Jose that gathered a number of very interesting things. It's probably the largest concentration of entrepreneurs on earth. There's people from all over the world that come here to be inspired, to create, to innovate, to launch their business at a global scale. Of course, we all know about the high concentration of VCs, about 400 firms in the valley. This is chicken and egg. The VCs just follow the entrepreneurs. Trend-setting region, like the whole of California, where in food, in culture, in anything, in technology. Usually the next new things will pop up in California 2 or 3 years before anywhere else. And this propensity of maximum ambition, thinking very big. And that's a little bit of the value proposition also that we have here, where we kind of provide a transformative experience for entrepreneurs and raise up the level of ambition. But not only it's not a valley, but also it's not a market, I would argue. The Silicon Valley is really a global commercialization platform. You can interchange commercialization with innovation if you wish. But that's really what it is. It's really to tackle the world. So we all know about those brands. I won't swell too much. All those companies, most of those companies were venture-backed, obviously, and represent huge opportunities. The other point of context that I should specify is the pace of things. Whether it's new or not, I don't know, but remains the fact that it's a very dynamic ecosystem where you have companies like Facebook were not in existence 8 years ago when you think about it. Goes on IPO this month, $100 billion in valuation, a huge amount of wealth created in a very short amount of time. Zynga, another one, less than 5 years. We're talking about $20 billion in valuation, etc. Google, 10 years ago, a bit more than 10, but you know. So all those names, you know, and that's another element which is remarkable there. Apple, the largest company in the world right now. Venture capital, again, probably something you all know about, but about 40% of all VC deployed in the US is deployed in the Silicon Valley. The new change, just for is really New York. New York is moving up over the past few years, up to 10% now. So that's an interesting change. I think it's also a reflection of the emergence of digital media and social media, as we have seen in the Valley as well. So this is what I'm going to present to you. It's a novel approach to basically further the acceleration of those most brilliant Kenyan entrepreneurs and startups. This is a phased approach that we developed more than 3 years ago. We started more than 3 years ago. The first phase being the hearing stage, if you wish, and the qualification, where basically entrepreneurs are qualified and are sensitized to that opportunity. So that's being done through boot camps in Canada, through partnership with various intermediary organizations here that can help us qualify those companies, or directly through us, companies coming to us in fairly large numbers, I must say. I was struck by that also, coming to that posting. Phase 2 is really the exposure, the intensity for 2 days. We call it different names, but one of the branded program is 48 Hours in the Valley. Some of you may have heard about it. The next issue will be in 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. 200 companies applied. Only 20 will be retained. Those that have the highest potential to take advantage of that program. Another one which I like, which we'll be delivering next week, is Tech Women Canada. There was a little bit of a big underrepresentation of women in that program. So we decided to design a program specifically for women. And to my own astonishment, we had more than 70 CEO women in tech entrepreneurs that applied, and a very high quality. And we have selected actually 4 from from Ontario for a total of 12. So that will help also rebalance the pipeline, if you wish, of client. Third phase, which is really where we probably are the most active, and it's the longer-term engagement, the guts of the program. It's the CTA per se. And I'll get to what I think I talked about those points, so I will skip through it. I may come back to that one later. 48 hours, I talked about it, the woman. The CTA, so the physical space. So what is it in practical terms? We offer space for up to 3 months to qualified companies that went through that pipeline or through a process, and we provide them the intensity of the valley. Networking, access to mentor, the whole goal being growth and job creation back home. The first one we opened was 3 years ago in Sunnyvale, which is a bit south of Silicon Valley. That was the only game in town at that time. This is a magic place. There is 200 companies at any given time. So they managed, to their credit, they managed to build their own ecosystem within a building of 150 square foot. There's a lot of peer-to-peer learning going on because of that critical mass of companies, the VCs, the event of the service provider of all sorts, the corporates, very important, are coming down. They don't even need to leave the building. Of course, if they leave the building any single day, you have 10 networking opportunities in the neighborhood, and that's what's part of the magic of the Silicon Valley. So we had through this one more than 60 companies already, and jobs of all sorts. I'll get to some example of tangible results in a minute. Rocket Space, it's our second one in the city of San Francisco, taking stock of the fact of this movement from the valley to the city of companies in digital media, social media. You have Twitter, you have Zynga, you have Zynga, all those companies that set shop in head office in San Francisco. So it's also a demographic issue. Young, usually male gamers that like to go in cafe and work there. So taking that with us, we decided to open a second one last year in March. And it has been beyond expectation. The interest is huge, as you all know. There's a lot of acceleration program being deployed right now in Canada. And to be honest, it addressed a lot of this type of clientele. Just a little ad in passing, in Toronto, in Ontario, there's 2 upcoming accelerator programs I'd like to bring to your attention. Hyperdrive, which is out of Communitech, and the application is still open. So it's managed, again, by Communitech. It's seed funding, it's mentoring, typical acceleration program. I would recommend. I think there's another 2 weeks to apply as a startup. And there's another one which is still under the radar, but which is coming up. And they'll, I think, officially be launched in June 19. It's called Extreme Startup out of Toronto. So stay tuned, and certainly those 2 programs will serve as qualifier and feed for the CTA in Silicon Valley as well as in New York, since we also have, you'll hear it in a minute. We now have one in New York, which I'm really delighted about. Moving on and expanding the concept to other areas, we thought we would scale up and apply the concept to clean tech. And we did our homework, and we figured out a place that makes sense in San Jose. It's called the Environmental Business Cluster. They have a great network. Here we have 3 offices. We're a bit more cautious with clean tech. And that's, as you can see on the picture, ribbon cutting exercise. So we've been going on a ribbon cutting spree lately with opening CTAs one after the other. So that's the one in clean tech. And the last baby is for life science. Life science, a few years ago, was not mature for that kind of approach. They started quite recently to adopt the same kind of principle as what has been done in the tech. Not for all of life science, but for a portion of it at least. Diagnostic, medical instrument, health IT, and early discovery of customers, the same kind of approach, acceleration. And again, through a discussion of 2-3 years with an excellent group based out of UCSF at Mission Bay in San Francisco, we opened last March with our ambassador, Gary Dewar, the fourth accelerator for life science company, which is fully subscribed already. Although with no Ontario company yet, I understand that the next wave will include an Ontario company. So lots of logos, but basically to illustrate the fact that we had more than 100 companies already going through that last phase of the program, probably 500 if you start at the beginning. The current tenant, quite a few from Ontario, especially for the tech accelerator. I think Paid Traffic is Ontario, no, maybe Quebec, sorry. Grid Loyalty, Photo Bounce, G-Shift, certainly. So Top Hat Monocle also is from Toronto, most of them actually. A few stories. I think that the best way to illustrate the value proposition is to give a few examples of success. One that I like very much is at Parlor, which was at our first boot camp, then one of the first tenants at Plug and Play. They took that opportunity to really connect with their first big customers. By the way, they deliver ad campaign on Facebook exclusively now for a very big account like Groupon. Now it's several dozens of millions of dollars in revenue every year. Exclusive advertising for Groupon as an example of a good client. The last end of the story might not be so good, but in fact it's very good because they have been acquired 2 months ago by AdKnowledge, which is a US company from Texas, I think, in the same space. However, they of course retained the jobs they created here in Toronto, more than 20 employees. And Hussein Faisal, the founder, never dropped a cent of equity. So he's up for his next venture with a lot of experience from the Silicon Valley, probably in Toronto. So more jobs to be created. Nice story. I have a whole slew of stories, but in the interest of time, I will skip them. Just one last one, because it's, again, I'm taking Ontario's story here. Switch Video, which is a recent tenant that produced cartoons for explaining business model for companies, could be used for us. DFAIT, but has been used for C100. And Collingwood, they created 3 jobs as a result of the client they enlisted in the Valley. More. Last point on the C100, which is a very important foundation of the whole program, and basically the last stone of that program. There's a huge community of Canadian expat in the Valley. They made it. I cannot name one single corporation in the Valley with Canadian executive. So we thought it was a great result. Many of them wish to give back and wish to mentor and wish to support entrepreneurship. That has been their experience. So they come together. We help a little bit that to happen. And they come every month to the CTA. They mentor our companies. They're basically driving the process now for the 48 hours in the Valley. So it's a very incestuous relationship. We host them at Rocket Space. So there's the headquarters. So there's a very nice alignment of purpose and access for our CTA tenants. So a great organization that is up for a great success. Just to close, I won't bore you with bureaucratic details here, but oops, well, I think that's all I have on C100. But just in summarizing, what's the purpose of all of that? Creating jobs. That's the purple colors. Creating growth. That's the final outcome that we measure, and we had quite some evidence that we're successful. For ourselves, the green color is really to scale up our operation. So we sort of adopted the culture of Silicon Valley, scaling up our own operation with the CTA so we can serve more clients better with less or more amount of resources and people. And finally, and that's probably a bit of a stretch and a less obvious connection, but the CTA has served in a few instances as a tool to attract investment. It's an ongoing promotion booth for Canada. We have logos. We're always the first in those accelerators, so it's very visible. And by the activity of those companies, it set a footprint for Canada and a mark of excellence. So we had a few stories that were actually generated on the investment side by the presence of the CTA. On that, I exceeded already my time. So if you have any question, I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. That sounds like a really exciting program. To have exposure to the intensity of Silicon Valley is obviously very valuable as from the success of the program. For those of you just joining us this afternoon, my name is Sharon Jobity. I am the Director of Human Resources with the Ontario Centres of Excellence and your host for this afternoon. Taking the podium now for the next Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada presentation is Regine Clément. Regine is Trade Commissioner at the Consulate General of Canada in New York, and the topic of her presentation today is Canadian technology accelerators at NYC, clean tech and digital media. Welcome, Regine.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity of presenting here today. So today I'll be presenting on two new programs that we have at the Canadian Consul General in New York City, two Canadian technology accelerators based on the technology accelerators that were developed in San Francisco by Thierry, who just presented. In our case, we are looking at digital media and clean tech. The Canadian Consulate in New York, we cover the tri-state area. That would be New York State, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And though this presentation will focus mostly on New York City, one point I want to make is that we're blessed with having the largest concentration of headquarters of Fortune 500s in our territory, 86 of them. And so it creates a great opportunity for us and Canadian companies in our market. So what is the innovation value proposition of our region? Again, focusing on New York City mostly. Traditionally, we've always thought of New York City as a financial industry hub, financial industry, advertising, and media. And following the economic downturn, the City of New York has made a lot of efforts in trying to diversify its industries. And in doing so, they have put a lot of resources and efforts in trying to encourage people to become entrepreneurs and to work in the digital media area, tech as well, some in clean tech. So some of the updates on what's going on in New York City, it's actually right now the fastest growing tech sector in the US. It is currently the #2 hub for internet and mobile technology after Silicon Valley. We've really seen an explosion of startups in New York City in the past 7 years, almost 100 per year that have been added in Manhattan and most recently in Brooklyn, which we're now calling the Brooklyn Tech Triangle, which includes Dumbo, downtown Brooklyn, and the Brooklyn Navy Yards. And what's interesting is obviously that the cluster of media, of digital media, has really been relying on the expertise that already resides in New York City, which is obviously advertising and media and financial and fashion. I think the move by Google as well in 2010 has really given a clear message to the community that New York City is serious about tech, and many have followed suit, including Facebook and many others. In terms of venture deals, we've seen really a large increase. Thierry mentioned previously that we're now at 10% of VC deals in New York for all of the US. And the largest deals we've seen with Gilt, Zodoc, Tumblr, and Foursquare, which are all New York City-based startups. We've also seen an important surge in angel financing, over $45 million in the past 7 years, mostly in tech, some also in clean tech. And through the process where New York City is trying to support this industry, we've seen also the development of over 12 new accelerators and incubators and accelerator programs in New York City, again, mostly in tech, some in clean tech. So what is the consulate's value proposition? So we took the model from San Francisco, which is obviously a very successful model, and looked at it and asked ourselves the questions, would it work in New York City? And the reason we decided to do it is because of these recent developments in New York. In digital media, we really find that there is a clear cluster with, and this is not only an innovation cluster, it's also a market for digital media. We have strong startups, angel financing, VC, industry expertise, and customers. So it made sense for us to develop a program around that cluster. On the clean tech side, we hesitated a little bit because even though there's not a clear cluster of clean tech in New York City, there's certainly some strong elements, and that includes a customer cluster. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but essentially it revolves around the needs of the city of New York City, obviously these 86 Fortune 500 companies that can serve as strategics, the GEs, the Honeywells, et cetera, but that can also serve as supply chain opportunities for Canadian clean tech companies. In them trying to meet their corporate sustainability goals. So on the clean tech side, we decided to go virtual. So that means that we're not inviting companies yet to come and sit at an incubator space. Again, the reason for that is that we're keeping an eye on clean tech in New York City, and also because clean tech has a very different business model. The commercialization takes a lot more time to do, and obviously cuts across all sectors. So it's a little bit more complicated. So we're testing this for the first time. So quickly, because this is pretty much based on the San Francisco model, I'll do this rather quickly on the digital media side, but essentially the goal again is to provide introductions to local, again, financiers, potential customers, and other key interlocutors in the ecosystem. And like San Francisco, the companies, 6 companies every 3 months get a chance to have a desk at General Assembly, which is one of the top incubators for digital media in New York City. And so those companies get access, obviously, to all of the services that are offered by General Assembly. They also get enhanced services from our consulate in New York City, and they also get introductions, an opportunity to be teamed with mentors, and introductions to investors. So here are the 6 current companies in the CTA program. They're just about to graduate and do a demo day, and we've recently selected the next 6, but they haven't been announced yet, to my knowledge. So in terms of clean tech, again, similar goal. I think what is different with clean tech too is the virtual approach allows for the clean tech companies to use our accelerator when they need it. So they don't need to come, it's not a set program where they need to travel to New York City for 3 months and be at a desk. So the programming is ongoing, and they have access to the various elements of it when they need it. So the flexibility was key with clean tech because, again, of the complexities around the commercialization and the various needs. Right now in the accelerator, we have 35 companies, and they're all at various stages of development. So obviously need different things. So the clean tech accelerator is geared especially towards technology demonstration opportunities, and I'll speak a little bit about that later. But in New York, there are a couple of key agencies, and especially with the 4 utilities in the area that offer some very specific opportunities for technology development, which is one of the ways that the companies can gain visibility and enter the market in the US. So a very important part of commercialization in clean tech. Again, customer cluster, which I'll talk about. There is a small community of VC clean tech in New York, certainly not as large as we see in San Francisco, but there's some key top-tier players as well, so there's an opportunity there as well. Oops. Okay, regarding technology demonstration opportunities, one of the key opportunities lies with NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Basically, this is a public benefit corporation, and they get their funding from the ratepayers through Con Edison and National Grid. My understanding is that they have an $800 million budget annually. Now, this doesn't all go to demonstration projects, but a good portion does. And even though there are economic development elements to it, we've already seen quite a few Canadian companies getting funding for demonstration with either ratepayers, so the buildings, or the retailers, or the utilities, Con Edison and National Grid. So basically, the opportunities are in energy efficiency and renewable energy. And on the R&D side, the Power Systems Program does wind, solar, hydro, heat recovery, and fuel cell. And if you go to their website, there's an area where they basically post all the funding opportunities that are current and upcoming. I would encourage, if you're interested, to actually, you can get the regular emails as soon as a new opportunity comes up. New York Power Authority is not part of NYSERDA because they basically provide the energy to the municipalities in New York State. So they have their own program for technology demonstration, and they have an RFP coming up in a few months on solar PV. There's also the New York State Energy Highway, which is a recent request for information by May 30th. This is mostly for developers, transmission, and renewable energy. But they will be posting the developers' names on the website after the RFI. And so if technology providers are interested in bringing value to those propositions, they will be able to do so and get in touch with them. And then the RFP will be out this summer. Other opportunities in technology demonstration are related to the needs of New York City. They have a very aggressive GHG reduction goal, and New York City, just the municipal buildings, there are over 4,000 of them. And so they need to reduce their GHGs by 2017. So we've seen a lot of opportunities there for the Canadian companies as well to do demonstration projects to then be adopted by the various buildings in New York City. And finally, demonstration opportunities with the Fortune 500. Most recently, meetings with PepsiCo, Johnson & Johnson, Avon, et cetera. They're very willing in certain areas to do demonstration pilots. So the customer cluster, I talked a little bit about New York City and their reduction goal of 30%, which offers an opportunity. Again, I talked about the Fortune 500 in the tri-state, a few more that are mentioned here. And not only looking at supply chain, but GE has the GE Global Research Center in New York State, and one of the largest research centers, and they certainly have quite a bit of funding for research. So we've seen opportunities there with Canadian companies as well. Here is just a list of some of the VCs that we've been meeting with. As you see, I mean, it's not a large group, but we've got some key players in New York City. Most of these VCs are looking for, later stage companies, minimum $5 million in revenue. But they're always interested in building their pipeline, and so they've been asking us to provide earlier stage companies that they can follow if we cannot provide the later stage companies. And here are some of the angel groups in New York City as well, and also a few suggestions of groups that online where you can find information or funding recommendations for your company in New York City. So in terms of the Clean Tech Accelerator, we've already seen some successes. An example would be that, in fact, it's an Ontario company with emissions technology. What we've been able to do for them is, in speaking with a utility and the City of New York, we saw an opportunity for them to do a demonstration with these two entities. And this was an area that neither the city nor the utility even thought of. So we had a conversation and presentation by the company, and the city is now writing an RFP based on that technology, which most likely will go to that company. So that's the type of work that we're doing with the Clean Tech Accelerator. We're thinking of now scaling. Yeah, I guess scaling the clean tech accelerator and to develop it into a more traditional CTA model. So we'll continue with the virtual accelerator, but we will also add the element or the opportunity for these companies to come to New York City for 3 months as well. In the New York City, it's called NYU Acre, which is the New York City incubator for clean tech. And we're looking at doing this late fall. And we already have a few applications. So we're pleased with the progress we've seen with the Clean Tech Accelerator. That's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, if there's interest on the Digital Media Accelerator, I do have information on the business cards of the woman who's leading that accelerator. And if you're interested in clean tech, please come see me. We welcome new members. Thank you.
Thank you, Regine. Again, another very exciting program. Our next presentation from Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada is brought to you courtesy of Maurice Egan, Counsel and Senior Trade Commissioner from the Consulate General of Canada in Boston. And Maurice will allow an opportunity for some questions at the end of the presentation. Welcome, Maurice.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'll answer to Maurice or Morris. It doesn't really make too much difference, but my friends in Chicago and Boston would say I pronounce it the Irish way, so I go with Morris most of the time. So I am in Boston, Senior Trade Commissioner, but previous to that I was in Chicago, and can anybody in Toronto make the connection between Boston and Chicago? Any hockey fans in the crowd? Well, the Stanley Cup follows me around. So I'm hoping really that somebody like Jim Fair at our regional office in Toronto will offer me a job because I'm a diehard Leaf fan, and it's been quite a while since it's been in Canada and certainly in Toronto. But what I wanted to do today, and it's always tough to follow guys like Bill and Emmanuel and Regine, Terry. What I thought I'd do, I'm not really sure how well people in the room would understand what we actually do on the ground. So what I'm going to try to do for you is, I have no PowerPoint presentation, but I'm going to give you two kind of case studies of how we operate. And if technology holds true, we're going to show a little video clip at the end, right? Yeah? Okay. We're going to try a little video clip that I hope will give you some understanding of what we do. And really, the title of my presentation, as you can see, was Innovation in the Mature Marketplace. Well, you can't get much more old school than Boston. But in our shop, I have trade commissioners that focus on various priority sectors, and I'm going to highlight two of them today. One is the life science sector, specifically the med tech device area, and one is clean tech. And really, as maybe you've heard me say before, innovation really cuts across everything we do. And our focus really is the Canadian client, the SME particularly, and for folks that are in the economic development field, we can be a tremendous ally for you and your clients on the ground, and for us, you can actually be a tremendous support for us in identifying firms that are ready to come into our market or our markets. So the first case study, excuse me, that mentoring event yesterday really took the toll out of my voice box. But the first example I'm going to use today centers around a mission to MedTech. And MedTech, for those of you who don't know, is a very large investors conference. The last one was held in October of 2011. And my trade commissioner that's responsible for that sector worked with regional offices like the office here in Toronto and our whole network on the life science sector across the country. And in collaboration with a local partner, and the local partner is always key to any success of an event that we do, in this case it was Mass Medic, we identified 8 companies that we thought were qualified, let's say, to come down to the MedTech Investors Conference. So we had 8 applicants. They were screened out with the local partner. 2 were selected to present, basically pitch, at the MedTech conference. So it's a competitive process that we put these companies through. A third company, actually 2 other companies were identified as being of interest, and one of them came down but wasn't able to present at the MedTech conference. So we built a program for these companies around this particular event. We did a targeted network event where we brought in angel investors, we brought in VCs, we brought in people in the sector, very focused. 14 people sat around, chatted, got to know each other. The companies that we brought down actually stood up during the dinner, did their 30-second elevator pitch, which every entrepreneur should have their 30-second, well, we all should have our 30-second elevator pitch. And in fact, the dinner was one of the key kind of highlights of the event, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. So the two entrepreneurs were helped in preparation in terms of their PowerPoint presentation. They presented at the MedTech conference, and we made targeted introductions for them. In total, there were 27 local contacts introduced to these companies as a means of introducing them into the market, but also, you know, developing their network. And to date, this is one of the highlights basically of 2011 for us. One of those companies, and it actually came from an introduction at the dinner, has already received $2 million in angel financing. So that's not bad. It's an Ontario company. I won't mention the name because I asked, but I didn't hear back from them in time to actually mention the name. But we're very pleased with that success story. But in addition, all those companies involved, all three at least, have been continuing to facilitate their network in the area and really working to develop. And in fact, the second company that presented has also been successful in getting money into their company. So we're okay on time. The second example, excuse me. The second example I wanted to give you is one that is more of an in-house event where we actually manufactured an event. And this is around the clean tech sector. And the clean tech sector, or the energy efficient sector, is an area that we focus on very much so in Boston. And like the life science, the med tech area, it's not just a one-year planning process for us, but it's something that we're doing on an ongoing basis. So the clean tech, or the energy efficiency area, is something that we've had a bit of a multi-year approach on. And the trade commissioner involved in that began planning the event, and she, along again with the network across the country to recruit companies, brought in 21 executives from 16 Canadian clean tech firms. And this goes back a couple of years, but the program basically was the initial phase, and these companies were brought in. And what we did was we developed a very specific program for them. We developed, he would say, information sessions, policy statements sessions for them, developed one-on-one meetings for them, and basically gave them an opportunity to pitch. Again, it was a very, the partnering aspect of this is very key, not only in Canada, but the local partners are key to us as well. And I don't know any of you who know Boston, the firm of Choate, Hall & Stewart. Steve Hurwitz is sort of a bit of a rock star in Boston, is well known in Canada. They were a company that actually helped us partner on that event, actually put money into that event to support the Canadian companies coming down to Boston. Of course, they have their own agenda, as do we, but we're all mature adults, and we understand what that agenda is. But the other local partners, Ontario Centres of Excellence, were involved in that. OCRE at the time, I guess it's Invest Ottawa now. The regional offices, and a multiple of organizations from the Boston area, including New England Canada Business Council, the Maine International Trade Center, etc. So as I was saying earlier, we had individual meetings, policy briefings, networking dinners. Again, the companies were doing the elevator pitches. And the event, again, was very successful, where companies have been introduced into the market and gained access. And I'm going to ask maybe now, you know, I can stand up here all day and talk, but I think our clients actually speak better on what we do for them than I can myself. So if this works, this is a video that sort of highlights what happened during this energy efficiency event.
conference like this is all about building new relationships, building new networks.
It's one-stop shopping. You have dozens of great ideas. Inevitably, there's going to be a role for almost everyone.
There's an excitement because people understand that we're at the beginning of a very, very long, large wave.
Sustainability needs to be something that becomes part of the fabric rather than one of these sort of marginalized concepts out there.
So that's why these conferences are extremely important, to be able to network with these vendors.
Events like this have been really superior in terms of putting us in front of the right people.
They've arranged meetings with venture capital firms, they've arranged meetings with commercial property groups, they've arranged meetings with consulting engineering firms, all of that without any cost, really direct cost to us.
The panel was actually made up of 3 senior energy managers within 3 top companies in the region.
For the rest of the panelists, how do we think about going to market? Who do we partner with? There are synergies simply from a partnership perspective and also from actually integrating those companies into our fold.
I'm only one person and can't evaluate all of those opportunities and vendors and technologies on a timely basis. So to have the consulate have already gone through that for us is a huge benefit and just a time saver.
We are looking for creative ideas. We are looking for how we can put the innovative technology to good use.
You always got to see, feel, and touch, and that's what places like this and conferences like this give you the ability to do.
We are a Canadian-based company, but about 95% of our business is here.
Canadian suppliers should look at the United States as a massive potential market.
Sometimes the smaller companies have the ability to customize and give you the attention that sometimes a bigger company might not. We're going to help partner with that company to take them to a bigger scale.
The U.S. is definitely the leader in innovation and R&D worldwide across all sectors. But when it comes to energy, for some reason, there is a tremendous focus on that aspect from the Canadian side.
We can be more profitable if we're more efficient. We can be more efficient more quickly when we can meet technology providers in a setting like this.
I can get, within 2 to 3 minutes, a quick overview of their product, then for them to follow up a few weeks later in more detail once they understand our business. It's a win-win.
Yes, you can hear the sales pitch, but then you can talk to the person and say, wait a minute, time out. Okay, give me the story behind the story. Give me the facts. Give me the data supports the conversation that you've got.
I get as much value out of this put on by the Canadian consulate as I would if somebody would typically charge, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to attend and have these types of one-on-one meetings.
It's all about meeting people, like everything in business. The program that's been put together here by the Canadian government is a fabulous program, and I've done just an outstanding job doing that.
This is my second event that I've attended put on by the Canadian consulate, and I'm here because the first one was so successful for me.
The quality of the appointments that they set up for us has been above our expectations.
Opportunities like this, especially where the relationships are coordinated on our behalf, give us an opportunity to lift our head up, meet new people, build new relationships, and broaden our business base.
So the one thing I would say about that video is it's unscripted, and of course we didn't fund those companies coming down, so they had nothing really to gain by saying that other than that's what they felt. So I think those companies that you're seeing there are like Blue Line Innovations. They're something of rock stars for us, and the real value of success from those events, and these are just two examples I've given you today, is that we're seeing these companies coming back and back into the market, and that's a real value that they're making some progress, and we're adding value to that. So one other thing, a couple other things, just again, these are ongoing efforts. These are not one-offs. This is part of a process. And the one thing I'd add is that my trade commissioner is working on that. She's actually developing a list of the top 25 to watch. And a couple of the fellows that are on that video are in the top 25 to watch. And we're working through that list, and we're going to use that list in our network, but also to encourage local contacts to talk to these people. And the last thing I would say is I would challenge anybody to get Whole Foods, Raytheon, and Staples in the same room to talk to our guys on the same day. And that's the type of thing that we were able to do for those. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Thanks very much.
Morris, thank you. Our next Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada presentation this afternoon is a joint effort by Jean-Dominique Irachi, Minister, Councillor, and Francois Gauthier, Trade Commissioner from the Canadian Embassy in Paris. Their topic today is Canada and France collaboration. Welcome, Dominique and Francois.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it relatively simple as to what many of my colleagues have spoken as to what they do. And I would say we'll use 2 or 3 examples, retail and some more wholesale type of work that we actually do. So France, why does France matter to Canada, and particularly in the technology space? It matters because it's one of the most mature science and technology provider that there is. It's an easy country to deal with. It's the 5th largest economy, and most importantly, it's one of the economy that has the highest concentration of large multinationals. Almost in any sector that you can think of, you will find a large multinational that dominates, either as number 1 or is in the top 3 of its own field. Whether it's Sanofi in the pharmaceutical field, Saint-Gobain's construction material, Airbus in aerospace. So anyone who has novel technology or wants to develop technology in one of these leading fields with a leading firm, somehow pretty quickly you end up dealing with a French firm. I mentioned a few of these fields: nuclear energy, environment, agri-food. You'll probably find French firms who are top, number 1 in the world, and who are doing very much, or are very science intensive or research intensive. France is our 4th country of collaboration, and most people will say, well, sure, I'm sure a lot of Quebec firms and Quebec organizations do business with France. And of course, there is a higher concentration of...
From Michael Shear. Michael Shear, please make your way to the Bruce Power Theater. Thank you.
So I'm glad they didn't ask, they weren't looking for me for this presentation. So anyways, there is, it's a large country of cooperation as well for Ontario, if you look at the auto sector, out west on the energy sector. And what we found is French firms are increasingly going westwards. Initially, west used to be St. Lawrence Street in Montreal. West of that used to be Western Canada. Now they're actually looking at Western Canada being more Manitoba and the prairies and the west, but they're quite present everywhere. We've got at a higher level, we've got a lot of the bricks in place, whether it's National Research Center based or university-based cooperation. There are hundreds of agreements through which one can conduct joint technology. At a much higher level, we're currently negotiating Canada-EU trade agreement, and that will enable, within that agreement, will enable more of those IP flows to occur between Europe and Canada, so particularly with France. I mentioned some of the major groups, and you know, if I were to do a quick poll of name me French firms, probably relatively quickly you'd run out of them. But the French firms I'm sure you cross their path every day. So let me just give a few examples to illustrate what I mean by at some point you need to deal with them. If you're in tires, Michelin is number 1. If you're in energy, the number 1 energy, the number 1 electricity, the number 1 nuclear firms are all French. Those are GDF, Suez, EDF, and Arriva in nuclear. I mentioned Airbus and aerospace, cosmetics, L'Oreal, chemicals, you get a Rhodia, Solvay that are quite internationalized. Lafarge is number 1 for cement, Saint-Gobain for construction material, and so on and so forth. I mean, you will find in every field, you will find somewhere a French firm. What do we do with them? Well, an ideal type of scenario, like I said, we do a bit of retail. So a Canadian company comes and sees us, and they're a startup, they have a product, they have some IP to promote, and they say, well, I'm looking at selling this to the space industry. The space industry is not exactly an industry you'll find in every country. And even if you find it in some countries, there's probably half a dozen buyers and maybe a few more institutes. So what we did for a particular firm was to help them access one of the 2 satellite builders based out of France. And they had plasma technology, plasma torches. They said, well, we've got this technology, but it's very difficult for us to market it to the world. And we put them in touch with EADS, and EADS quickly grabbed onto and latched onto it and thought, this is something, when we're offering services to our clients, this is something we should be adding. This is something we can be adding. So fairly quickly, they made their first sales through the EADS distribution network to a Korean institute to use and to install this piece of equipment. And so that's just a very quick example. Obviously, it took more time than that to set up. But really, the value added that we could bring out of the Canadian Embassy in Paris, out of the Trade Commissioner Service, was to actually identify the actual individual within the French firm that the Canadian company should be talking to. I have with me François Gauthier. So François is our Innovation Trade Commissioner. And so François's got a couple of examples, and to make sure I don't garble those examples, I've asked him to actually talk about them. François?
Merci, Jean-Dominique. Thank you. Yes, I'm a locally engaged employee, so I hope my English won't hurt your ears, you see. Just to tell you that, yes, it's important to have major groups in France, and one of our key services is to find target and key contacts for our clients, Canadian companies. So to obtain such contact information, this is the key element of our jobs to our clients. Just to tell you that we are two innovation trade officers at the embassy. My colleague is in charge of life science, biotechs, for instance. I'm in charge of ICT, aerospace, enabling technologies such as photonics and nanos. Multinationals are great groups, Sanofi, Thales, and Safran. So as an example, we are in direct contact with them to help Canadian companies to provide all their service, all their products, indirect with them. So we try to open doors to these companies or to their laboratories. Thank you. Also, we are in contact with corporate ventures. So these major groups are their own investment department. So we are in touch with them. We try to open doors to VCs, to these investment part of these companies. In this way, we are connecting VCs from France and from Canada to try to reduce risk in terms of investment, overseas investment. So this is one example. Another example, and this time in a specific sector, major sector, and in France and in Canada, aerospace. For instance, yes, tomorrow I will attend CRIAC Innovation Forum in Montreal. It's a forum managed by the Consortium Research and Innovation in Aerospace in Quebec. They will discuss about innovation for Canadian companies, but also with European. On this occasion, there will be a canapé workshop. Canapé is a consortium of major companies and European companies and Canadian companies in aerospace. And my job will be there to try to enhance connection between European and France. Just to give you some example, a few years ago, because in innovation it's a long term, we tried to connect fast optics that is connecting optical fibers, and nowadays they are providing their equipment to Airbus, and every R380 are connected thanks to a Canadian company, Fast Optics, sorry. Another Canadian company, Technaplasma, is nowadays in connection with EADS Astrium, so in the space industry, not only for the space industry in France, but in connection with the Korean university. So we are worldwide in such connections. Another example, but largely, is Safran, active in aerospace, but also in defense and security. Safran and Polytechnique Montréal opened a university chair 2 years ago, and this year they confirmed a $3 million of investment for this share for 2012 and 13. Another kind of activity, and that will be the last one, there is a kind of OCE discovery event in France, which name is Rendez-vous Carnot. And Rendez-vous Carnot is a kind of workshop, but a conference exhibition equivalent to this one with major and universities, centres de recherche, and other in France, but also in Germany, thanks to Fraunhofer, for example, Finland, but also Spain, and Canada, next October, will be the first overseas country that will have companies, universities, and laboratories attending. There will be one-on-one meetings, not 3 minutes, like yesterday, but 40 minutes to discuss in concrete about partnerships in innovation, so next October. And so you're very welcome for your listening, and I'm ready for your question, as well as Jean-Dominique. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's very interesting to hear about the opportunities for opening doors and connecting VCs between Canada and France. And Francois, I do want to say that I love the French accent, and it was definitely not hard on the ears. It was very nice on the ears, actually. Thank you. Yes, they've got me completely scripted here, so I can't make a mistake. Now we have our next Foreign Affairs. Now our next Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada presentation for you today. Joining us is Renato Calder, Business Development Global Practice Lead, who is based in Vancouver. Renato's presentation is entitled Green Chemistry, Separation Technologies and Blood Pathogen Inactivation, Collaboration Opportunities with a Japanese Company. Again, if you have any questions, we'll have an opportunity after the presentation. Welcome, Renato.
Hi, everyone. As you can probably see here from the presentation, I have named the Japanese company that I'm talking about. It's a company called Asahi Kasei. How many people here have heard of Asahi Kasei? Show of hands. Nobody? How many people have heard of Asahi? Okay, so just to be clear, are we talking about the beer company here? No, we're not. It's completely unrelated from Asahi Beer, which is probably where you heard Asahi name. So I'll quickly go over where does this lead come from, why should I consider working with Asahi Kasei, what are the specifics of the opportunities for collaboration, and what are the next steps that you can take if you have technologies in this space. So Asahi Kasei is not a small company by any means. It's got about $20 billion in revenue, 25,000 employees. They spend about $500 million a year in R&D. Core operations, really probably 50% is in chemicals and fibers, but they do have other things. They build homes, they have construction materials, they have subsidiaries that make electronics and materials for electronics, and they have healthcare unit as well. And I think that everyone here in this room has been touched by Asahi Kasei technologies. Everyone's probably actually carrying one of their inventions in your pockets. And that's the lithium-ion battery that powers all of our cell phones and all of our electronic devices. So where did this lead come from? I've had a relationship with Japanese companies for a while now. I guess it started probably 15 years ago when I first went to Japan. And I've spent a total of 6 years of my career in Japan. And with that, have gotten to know a lot of the major corporations there. So, and while I was working with one Japanese venture capital firm, they were looking at a specific deal in Vancouver, and Asahi Kasei actually conducted all of the due diligence on that firm for this investment that was made, and they were very impressed with the Canadian technology, the Canadian companies. And they came to me and said, you know, we would like to meet with you, not as the venture capital firm that we were sort of working with, but as Asahi Kasei, because we would like to look for opportunities for our own firm here in Canada. So I've been working closely with IRAP. I imagine most of you are familiar with this funding organization. They provide grants to a lot of innovative Canadian companies. And so we've been collaborating to provide leads to this firm so that they can make investments, they can do joint development with Canadian innovators. So why would one consider working with Asahi Kasei? Well, as I mentioned, they're looking for technologies here in North America. And while they're not a small company, $20 billion, they're not quite as large as some of their competitors. If you talk about companies such as BASF, that are probably 4 or 5 times or maybe even larger than that in comparison. So what they've decided to do is they've decided to go and talk to companies at an earlier stage than their competitors are generally willing to consider. So with that, that's why I think that this is the opportunity that I wanted to talk to people about here in this venue. Most of the companies that I'm talking to, they're looking for companies that are mature enough to go into a foreign market. But Asahi Kasei, very different. They said, you know, if you have some results that you can share and it's in areas of interest to us, then we would like to talk. In general, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that they like to do is joint development, and this is really the preferred form of collaboration for them at an early stage. They can help fund that development, but they don't like to make an investment right off the bat into a company. They're not, although they have a corporate VC office, the way that they operate is really initially through collaborations. And they're very serious. I mean, a lot of the companies that we have introduced to them, they have come to Canada, met with them. Some of them, their discussions are ongoing. So this has only started in January, and I think that they've probably been to Canada about 6-7 times in this period. So talking about the specifics of the opportunities, and they're very broad, a very large company looking for many different things, but they've narrowed it down to 3 things that they're very actively looking for. One of them is in the green chemistry side. And if you look here at this slide, we have, you can see in blue there, that's the part that's the green chemistry, and the rest is the traditional chemistry. So if you have technologies that, or you know, some of the companies that you might know that can convert cellulosic biomass into things, especially sugar or propylene or butadiene, those are technologies that they would like to explore with you. They're willing to sit down and do some joint development to get to this new economy, the green chemistry economy. Another thing that they're looking for is separation technologies in general. Now, Asahi Kasei is already very strong in this space. They do a lot of research in membrane technology, for instance. And, but there's always new things being done by innovative startups, and that's what they would like to tap into. So technologies, separation technologies that can help minimize energy consumption. As you all know, distillation column technology is very energy intensive. So membranes can be a very good option to replace those technologies. So they're focusing right now on liquids such as biofuel and bioethanol and the solvents. Waste solvents. So if you again have technologies in this space, please do let me know. And this is a final thing that I would like to mention here: blood pathogen inactivation. This is a very new space. I think that there's not that many companies that are doing research in this space. Asahi Kasei is already very strong, as I mentioned, in separation technologies such as membranes, adsorption technologies, and these are some of the products that they already sell that are listed there. But they're looking they see pathogen inactivation as something that is going to be critical in the future. So right now, in many countries, you have blood that's contaminated with a variety of pathogens, and it's very difficult to use them for transfusion. So you have to test those for certain pathogens, but perhaps there are things that you can't even detect at this point, and you're going to end up doing blood transfusions to people and making them sick. So there are people who are doing research in this space of even known pathogens such as for hepatitis or HIV, and finding ways to inactivate those pathogens in the blood while not destroying the properties of the blood itself. And that's they're willing to fund research at pretty much any stage in this space. So again, very different from the other two opportunities, which were closer to clean tech, but still using that kind of separation technology. So this is very short. I knew my presentation is going to be short, so I'll give enough time for Jim to follow up on this. But if you have, again, some information that you would like to reach out to Asahi Kasei, what they ask is that we provide to them a non-confidential document describing the company, research, and technology as clearly as possible so that they can evaluate it and determine whether or not there is a match between the company and its technology and what Asahi Kasei is doing right now. You have my contact information there. So please, you can send me an email. And one of the things that they've been very good at is, and it's a very valuable thing, because we've developed this trusted relationship with the company, they will review all of the documents that we send to them. And if they're not interested in a specific company, they will tell us exactly why. Why is it that it doesn't fit with what they're doing? Or why is it that they don't think this technology has potential in some instances? So I think if you yourselves or if you know anybody else in this space, this is very real opportunity to get some funding and to eventually commercialization, because that's what they want. They want to develop products that they can sell worldwide. Thank you very much.
Renato, thank you. Our final presentation, we're moving right along this afternoon, from Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada, is brought to you by Jim Fair. Jim is Director and Senior Trade Commissioner with the Trade Commissioner Service Regional Office. Jim's presentation is Go Global, Start Local. Jim, welcome to the International Cafe.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I guess I'm the cleanup hitter here for Team Trade Commissioner Service this afternoon. Delighted to see some folks still remaining. Really, I'm not going to take a lot of your time, and I'm sure you have other things you may wish to move on to. My key message, other than that title, is to reflect that in Canada, we have a network of trade commissioners that is at your doorstep resource in order to access our global network. We've already heard this afternoon from across the globe, United States and Europe, and through Renato and his presentation, Japan even. Clearly, with 150 points of service globally, the Trade Commissioner Service is extensive. For a Canadian enterprise, and particularly small or medium-sized Canadian enterprise in Canada, sitting in their place of business thinking, how do I access this great resource that's out there? The power of the internet may allow you to find us through Googling, but equally it may not. So the key message here is that through our regional office network in 5 core hubs now, one here in Toronto that I lead, but also in Montreal, in Vancouver, in Calgary, and in Halifax, supported by a series of satellite offices, typically one-person Trade Commission offices in the rest of the country, so we're present in all places. We are an immediate resource for you to find. If we look at what we can do, again, as a starting point in engaging a company, an enterprise that's looking at what might I want to do internationally, is it in the realm of doing business? Is it in the realm of finding a partner? Is it in the realm of looking for possible joint venture partners, investors, finance? The Trade Commissioner here in Canada at regional offices, again, a readily accessible point for a conversation that starts you on that path, and again, can leverage our global network to bring in additional intelligence based on some of the key triggers that for you as a company, for you in business, you'd be saying, these are pieces of the jigsaw puzzle I need to put together that have a connect to the international marketplace. So again, these are the sorts of things we can do to prepare for an international market, but again, read that in the context of collaborative engagement with international markets, not solely selling to international markets in a more narrow sense. So again, in that iterative process of a conversation, and I really frame the work of the trade commissioners in the regional office network in that context, that they want to engage in conversations with clients in order to better understand the needs, to understand what the objectives will be, to quantify how we as an organization can help. So we have a dialogue, we exchange some views, we can leverage into our network. We do, as this particular slide highlights, one of the key tools that we do to plug people into the global network is once we've had some chance to assess the particular interests of the client, the company, the enterprise, is to connect them to a market. Now, it could be one of the markets you've heard from here today, but equally it could be in any one of the other 150 locations around the world where possibly there is a connect that makes sense for you and your business. So that client connection to mission, well quantified, well identified as to what the need and objective is for our colleagues in our missions abroad, a low-hanging fruit that allows them to rapidly engage on behalf of the Canadian company in order to achieve the benefits and results for that company very quickly. Put into your hands the material, the information, the knowledge you need specific to that market that allow you to move rapidly to success with whatever that endeavor is. So we don't do that by ourselves either. These individual trade commissioners, be they in satellites or in the larger hub regional offices, we are clearly working to link our network of partners together with you, the client. And again, sometimes you will already know many of these different actors that are listed there, for example, EDC, BDC, and so on. But in some instances, we clearly find that the correct links or the better links or the best links are not always immediately apparent based on work that the firm has already done, the client or the company has already done. So again, we are a resource that can expand that network, bring in the right kinds of people to a conversation to, again, empower you as the enterprise to be more rapidly successful. Finally, we do also facilitate and collaborate and in some cases even deliver a number of programs that are particularly relevant in the innovation space. So a few of these are listed here, Going Global Innovation, which again in Ontario is a very powerful program that we've been party to supporting and delivering through the regional office. My colleague at the back of the room, Pratima Rao, is our Innovation Science and Technology Officer and has been working very hard on marketing Going Global Innovation here in Ontario with great success. I think we are the province is the largest taker of the resource that flows through that program across the country, and with good results. We've been able to measure very clear outcomes and results for Ontario firms that have availed themselves of that program to facilitate their connections into international markets. Other programs that we support are listed there, the ISTPP and the ICP or INC program, which again can support a Canadian enterprise as they look at establishing presence and or improving their presence in international markets, working towards enhancing their productivity and a global success. So back to the starting point, really the message is the world is out there, it can be your oyster, but we happen to have a few knives and tools here in Canada domestically that can help pop that shell on that oyster and allow you as a firm to be more rapidly successful as you pursue your global interests. So don't overlook that as a starting point. Thank you very much.
Jim, thank you very much. That concludes our International Cafe presentations today. But I think it was very interesting. We had some great presentations, really looking at the potential opportunities through global partnerships, where relationships that are coordinated through some of our government programs really offer an extreme, it's very exciting and offers a really immense value and opportunities to really open doors and the great possibilities that can be generated here at home. So thank you everyone for your presentations today. I think it was very enlightening, very fascinating. And I'd just like to thank everybody for participating at our International Cafe. On behalf of OCE, on behalf of the Ontario Centres of Excellence, I'd like to thank you and also encourage you to just take a last look at our Discovery show floor today, where we've got some great exhibitors and some showcased areas. So thank you and enjoy the rest of the show.